Good evening and welcome to the Metropolitan Republican Club's webinar series. My name is Krisha Lenzo, and on behalf of the Met Club Board, we are so happy that you're joining us tonight. As a reminder, we have a live chat link in our Facebook page, and we hope you'll please make a donation to help support club events like these and to continue to get content. Tonight, we're so happy to have Jack Posobiec join us. Jack is a friend of the club and has been really an important part of reporting on the terrible policies of Joe Biden, which we all unfortunately know all too well. In addition, he has really found all this important information about Hunter Biden and provided us with insights with his guns and all of the controversy and foreign entanglements that have ensued thus far. So as background, in case you don't know Jack, which all of you should at this point to find the latest news, Jack is a veteran intelligence officer of the United States Navy with multiple deployments overseas. He has written 2 nonfiction books, Citizens for Trump, The Inside Story of the People's Movement to Take Back America, and 40 Warfare, a doctrine for a new generation of politics. He has also released a recent film, which people in our club should watch, given that it affected us directly. The film is the Antifa movement. Antifa Movie, all about the Antifa movement and what that means for our nation at this moment, given that it is a very real organization and affects us all at this point. So Jack, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, Krisha, thank you for that. And yeah, for that Antifa movie, if anybody wants to watch that, it's actually up for free at antifamovie.com. So it's super easy to get to. We're working with the people at Rumble right now. I think Rumble is definitely going to be sort of it's shaping up to be the alternative to YouTube, which not only is going to be live streaming and allowing conservative voices, but they're also monetized. They do the pre-roll ads, and from what I hear, that it's doing very well. I know there's a ton of traffic on the One American News page. A lot of people are also getting a lot of traffic. Don Jr.'s over there, Dinesh D'Souza's over there, and so it's going to be great. And what they're doing is they're working on adding a feature film section, and so Antifa Movie will be one of the first. It's actually called Antifa Rise of the Black Flags. I just call it Antifa Movie because it's easy to remember.
Right.
And so that'll be there. And funny enough, you mentioned nonfiction books, but going into Antifa, I actually, I'll sort of pre-mention it for people here. But so the 3rd book on all about Antifa has been finished. It's been completed. We don't officially have the pre-sale started yet. You actually can find it on Amazon, and which is funny because I haven't promoted it at all. We were just kind of making sure the Amazon page was set up for when we were ready to have it go. And then my publisher reached out to me the other day, said, "Jack, have you been promoting this this Antifa book on Amazon at all?" I said, "No, not at all. I haven't mentioned it." Why? I said, "Well, we sold a couple hundred copies already, and I was just wondering if you had been tweeting about it." I said, "No, I haven't even mentioned it." So it looks like people are organically even going to Amazon and just typing in Antifa, typing in my name, and pre-ordering the book already, which is kind of wild to think that that's going on. But I think it's just really cool. It speaks to the idea that so many people want to know what's going on with this movement, why it is that the Department of Justice doesn't seem very interested in going after them, but at the same time wants to go after every Trump supporter, every patriot, every red-blooded, God-fearing American. You're going through the Department of Defense now, calling people extremists if you're religious or pro-life. They're going through that. I've got a lot of people from the military sending me all these notes and pieces of information from their different extremism trainings, and it really is amazing. I said, "Look, guys, if you're a conservative in the military right now, if you're conservative in America right now, it feels like the deck is stacked against you." And that is one of the other reasons that a group like Antifa is able to operate with near impunity, that no matter what they do, yeah, they may get arrested if they cross the line too far, and that's the right, they should, but they do not get the type of vilification, they do not get the type of promotion that the press does when it comes, or excuse me, they do get promoted by the press, but when it comes to Antifa, because they are given a pass, right? Go back all the way back to Chris Cuomo when he said, "Not all punches are equal," when he was talking about Trump supporters, getting into it with Antifa. So not all punches are equal. So that's morally acceptable for one side to be violent, but it's not morally acceptable for you to defend yourself, right? This creates a massive problem. And that's something that I talked about in the book, and I get into a lot, that's this idea that the minute you break the seal, so to speak, on justification of political violence, the minute you begin going down that spiral, it creates for every option out for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? And so it's going to create that downward spiral. You're going to get caught in that trap. And that's why, going back, I can't believe it's been 4 years almost since I traveled right up there to New York City and went into Central Park when they were doing that Shakespeare in the Park production of Julius Caesar. And they had Melania was playing Caesar's wife, and Trump was supposed to be Julius Caesar. And every night they were stabbing him brutally. It was like a Quentin Tarantino scene. The amount of blood that was all over the stage. And we shared the video of what they were doing because this one thing wasn't live, of course, it wasn't broadcast. They were trying to hide it. Well, they were all laughing and cheering and applauding. This huge Central Park audience. And then so later on, we actually went and kind of crashed it and hit the stage and started protesting and saying that they are trying to justify political violence in America, because we knew even 4 years ago that this was something that the minute you break the seal on is very, very hard to put back in the bottle, and we never ever wanted that to happen.
And that's the most problematic aspect of it, this moral relativism, which is just run rampant. And the fact that people are now being canceled as a result of their political beliefs. And I think we as Republicans, as you said, the cards are stacked against us. We can't even speak out on any of these platforms, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere. And
well, Christian, could I actually mention something about cancel culture very quickly?
Totally.
Because I see a lot of conservatives who are upset about it. I see a lot of libertarians who are upset about it, and a lot of Republicans who are upset, and they don't like it. They don't want the cancel culture. Here's the problem with that, okay? This is basic game theory. And I went to CPAC and I said this, and I said the reason the conservatives lose is because they are not willing to meet their opponent with their own tactics. Because when you enter into a situation like that and your opponent is using these tactics of destruction against you, right, to wipe your movement out of existence. I hope everyone understands that the current leftist bent or strain, or whatever you want to call it, that's taken hold in academia, in corporate culture, in the Democrat Party, they want to rid the country of Republicans, conservatives, etc. Right? They want you gone. Right? They want your way of life gone. In Virginia, the teachers are now doxing parents who, I don't know if you saw the story, the teacher doxing parents who say they are against critical race theory. It's Loudoun County, Virginia. It's actually the wealthiest county in the United States of America. They're doxing parents who disagree.
Can you explain what doxing is for people who are not journalists? Maybe they don't know.
So doxing is the process of going after people and posting their private information online, either private photos, their name in some cases, if it's an anonymous person, their address, posting where they live. They were making lists and using their power as teachers and one actual member of the Loudoun County School Board to go after parents who weren't not even necessarily conservative, but they just disagreed with having this extreme radical critical race theory be taught to their children. And they created a Facebook group to go after those parents. So just to understand, like, everybody get on the same page. This is what the other side is willing to do, right? So what I've said is, when there's a situation like Alexi McCammond or TJ Ducklow or the USA Today editor who was just fired, and when people dig up their old tweets, you have to go all in. The only way to stop cancel culture is to cancel them back. That's what I'm talking about. So Alexi McCammond, right? She was a reporter at Axios. Then she started dating TJ Ducklow. He was deputy press secretary. He's Jen Psaki's press secretary. Obviously a conflict of interest there. However, then TJ Ducklow goes nuts when Politico is about to report it, starts threatening Tara Palmieri, who runs Politico Playbook, which is, of course, one of the most influential newsletters in the entire town, the entire of DC. Politico Playbook, that is your morning news, right? Everybody reads that thing. And yet TJ Ducklow on January 20th, on Inauguration Day, while Joe Biden is up there saying, if I hear one person who makes goes after someone or insults them this way, makes personal attacks, they will not work for me. They will be fired on the spot. On the very day that Joe Biden was saying that, TJ Ducklow was sexually harassing Tara Palmieri using extreme language. This all came out later in Vanity Fair. against her, and Jen Psaki tried to cover it all up. So we made sure to expose that. TJ Ducklo got canceled, fired from the White House. Then Alexi McCammond, the femme fatale in all of this, she goes over and is appointed editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. And if you guys don't know what Teen Vogue is, you may remember it from back in the day. What it now is a neo-Marxist propaganda rag targeting children, targeting primarily preteens and teen females. So Teen Vogue is, and go look at it. I'm not making this up. You can see the stuff they're pushing. So she became the editor-in-chief. She was named by Anna Wintour, who runs Condé Nast, as the editor-in-chief. But the problem for Alexi McCammond was she had a bunch of extreme racist and homophobic old tweets. And those tweets specifically were tweets targeting the Asian American Pacific Islander community from about a decade ago. Now, just so happens that, as we all know, that is the community what everybody is trying to stop hate crimes against. And of course, we don't want hate crimes against anybody, but we have to hold Alexi McCammond accountable for her words the same way that she holds other people accountable. So she was later fired. So a revolt took place. Then, the third one I mentioned. Then you had the reporter from USA Today, the editor from USA Today. She tweeted at the morning of the Boulder shooting, she tweeted that it's always white males who commit terrorism. It's white males every time. Well, it came out that it was actually a Syrian immigrant named Ahmed al-Sisi who committed, and what some are saying is that, there's sort of this argument right now as to whether or not it was ISIS inspired or a jihadist inspired attack, or what they're trying very hard, the family's trying hard to push, that it was simply a mental illness and he didn't know what he was doing, et cetera, regardless of his numerous Facebook posts, his father's numerous Facebook posts, talking a lot about sort of political Islam. And yet she tweeted that it was a white male. Well, USA Today fired her. So again, folks, I know you don't like it, and it doesn't seem like the sort of Marquis of Queensberry rules, but if one side is willing to cancel you, then if the other side is unwilling to cancel them back, how do you think that's going to end up? Right? How do you think this is basic game theory, prisoner's law. How do you think that's going to end? What you need to do is essentially create a cancel culture arms race until it gets to the point where each side is so spent and is so tired and so exhausted of this crap that we reach a point of mutually assured destruction and we say, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to institute, call it a 24-hour rule, a 48-hour rule, or come up with a series of, hey, if they were 5 years old, if they were 6 years old, whatever it is, to say we have to stop doing this to each other because, like it or not, we're all here in the same country together.
Well, I mean, in many ways, cancel culture is like fascism. Would you characterize it as that? And also, why is it that the Republicans can't push back? Why are we so reticent to fight dirty like the left has done to us with respect to cancel culture?
Well, so I would actually say it's more of a tactic that has much more to do with Jacobianism from revolutionary France, or the Cultural Revolution in China, the tactics of the Red Guards, the Stasi in East Germany. Because the Stasi, even if you go into the 1970s, they understood that because of the confluence of media, because it was getting so hard to keep information from coming out, they actually switched from a policy of, they created a policy called personal destructionism. And what they would do was, instead of locking people up and putting them into the secret prison system and wiretapping them, if has anyone ever seen Lives of Others? It's actually probably the best movie about East Berlin that you could ever find. It's one of the only movies that's ever been made that actually shows communism as it is. Child 44 is another example of a movie like that. But in East Berlin, actually, one of the main characters is a Stasi agent, and he falls in love with the girl he's surveilling. It's incredible. And it's a tragic story, truly tragic story. And after that point, they realized that, well, if information warfare was the name of the game, what the Stasi started to do was they would instead spread rumors about somebody. Or whether, rumors, half-truths, things without corroboration. Matt Gaetz comes to mind in terms of this, where instead of going after the person and snatching them, they would then spread rumors about them, try to destroy your life, destroy your interpersonal relationships, if possible, destroy your relationship with your wife or your fiance, make you unemployable so that you face economic and financial hardship. So there's nowhere, because if you can't make money, if you can't put bread on the table, you can't have a roof over your head, well, then you certainly can't be a dissident against the regime if there's no way to employ you. So these are actually some of the tactics that we would see used by the Stasi, and in some extreme cases, the Red Guards. And typically in terms of the Red Guards, which I do get into in the book quite a bit, I get into the Stasi as well, and into the Antifa book, because there's a lot about sort of the history of communism that goes into these tactics we see today. This playbook has been around for over 100 years. I really hope people understand that. And so we can go back to see how it's been used in the past and employed in the past. We have different names for it now. We don't call themselves Red Guards, they call themselves Antifa now, but they perform the same function. So the idea of struggle sessions, self-incrimination sessions, where you're sort of pilloried and you're told that you have to incriminate yourself. Eric Weinstein, when he went on Clubhouse a few weeks ago, and he was put in a room and he was told to apologize for his white privilege, and he started arguing that, he said, well, no, I'm not racist at all. I'm not, I'm actually quite anti-racist, et cetera, et cetera. And yet the people in the room just kept talking over him, yelling at him, saying, it doesn't matter what you say. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. You have to admit your crime, admit your crime. And these of course, they're all thought crimes. In Mao's China at the time, this, of course, wouldn't be done on Clubhouse, right? It's a different medium. They would actually use stadiums, soccer stadiums, hang a sign around your neck with your supposed crime. They would call you a counter-revolutionary or a suspected right-wing extremist, right? Actually, right-wing extremist. They're was the actual phrase they would use in Chinese to refer to these, they would call suspected right-wing extremists. So this was something. And then if you were, typically if your, self-incrimination was good enough, then they would let you go. Otherwise, maybe other things would happen, regardless, determining what you were accused of. But mob justice, mob rule is something that you would see all just endemic to these situations. The idea that there is no way to appease the mob, there's no way to get your name back once you've been accused, because even once you've been accused, that's a black mark against you that's going to carry on to not only you, but to your family members, and in some cases, several generations. So, well, you can't go with that family. That's a politically disloyal family. So your entire family now might be out of favor, might not be able to get certain jobs, might have certain avenues of life open to you, can't go to university, that sort of thing. Keep your kids out of school. So I would really categorize this as something that we have seen in the past. It's been extremely associated with communism. That's not to say that fascist governments haven't done similar things, but because it's coming from the left, it's very closely associated with revolutionary communism.
It is shocking what we're currently experiencing. And one name that doesn't seem to come up yet, the fact is he has a lot of news about him and it keeps getting buried. And you mentioned family and, actually people turning against, members of them, is Hunter Biden. I mean, he's someone who's always scot-free, going.
Remember, socialists never applied their own rules to themselves and their own families.
Right, exactly. Can you talk a little bit about your recent reporting on him with,
Sure.
the gun he had? Yep.
Yeah, and I can actually, I'll break a little news on here, but I'll reveal something that I haven't said publicly yet. So the story that was handed to me last week, I obtained documents on Hunter Biden of a gun purchase that he made in October of 2018, where on his gun purchase form, also known as an ATF form 4473, you are required to answer a certain series of questions. And since it is a federal government document, these are seen as statements you are making to a federal agency. And so if you lie on this, that is making a false statement to a federal agency, which is punishable with a monetary penalty. It's $5,000 and up to 10 years in prison, depending on the severity of the lie. In the box that was marked, are you a user of regulated substances, illegal drugs, depressants, et cetera, he marked no. Now, we also know, because of his laptop, because of all the documentary evidence that's clearly and freely available on his laptop, that he was a habitual drug user, certainly in the same time frame of him using this firearm. And so he lied to the ATF about this. So we've caught Hunter Biden in the commission of a felony, and so we reported that forward. Now, what's interesting is that Politico, The Blaze, Breitbart, One American News, and many other organizations, in the conduct of their investigation, went and spoke to the gun shop owner and asked him what was going on with all of this, because this gun ends up going missing. We later find out it was stolen by Haley Biden. Now, this, of course, was Beau Biden's ex-wife, who, following his tragic death, that Hunter Biden entered into a relationship with. This was a romantic relationship. And she took the gun from him, saying that she feared for his life. She feared he would use it on himself or to become a danger to others. So she took the gun and she threw it away in the trash can outside of a grocery store, which is across the street from a high school. Not exactly the kind of thing you want to do if you're from a family like, I don't know, the Bidens, and you care about gun control or just gun safety in general, or if you just have common sense. That's not something you do with a firearm, a dangerous weapon. And so following this, in discussions with the gun store owner, he actually reported forward that the first people he talked to in the whole thing was not the FBI, was not local police, was not the ATF, but in fact were Secret Service agents from the Wilmington Secret Service office. That they may have been doing this on their own time. They may have been trying to help out a friend, help clean something up for Joe. Agents who would have, in many cases, been assigned to Hunter Biden when he was the beneficiary of, or what's called a protectee of the Secret Service, when his father was the vice president. The children are typically afforded this. This was done for Trump and all of his children, Don Jr., Ivanka, etc., and all the way down to Barron. And so Hunter Biden clearly had extensive contacts with the Secret Service. We know this. It's nothing surprising there, nothing new there. But the fact that they showed up we're told, to the gun shop, they flashed their badges and they asked to receive the form that was given to them. The gun shop owner said, "No, I'm not authorized to give that to you." They then left. Then, following this, information was received that it was the FBI and the ATF who showed up. Now, since the ATF, of course, are the ones who regulate that, the regulators of that document it themselves, then they, of course, can request a 4473 from a gun shop owner. That is their business. That's the law. And so, of course, he's going to turn it over to them because they don't want to lose his FFL, his federal firearm license. And at that point, we understand that it eventually also went to a local law enforcement investigation, and they also received the same information, that the Secret Service was involved. The part of this that I haven't said publicly yet is that after I tweeted this, I have had the Secret Service call me 3 times on Sunday afternoon, email me Monday morning twice on 2 private email accounts. One is one that I tweet out every once in a while, my Proton Mail, but another is my Gmail, telling me this story is false. There is no involvement whatsoever by the agency. The Secret Service was not involved in this, and you need to correct your Twitter. I said, well, here's the problem with that, is my report was based on information that I received from Secret Service agents that I talked to, other members of the government that I talked to, people who are close to the gun store owner, I'll put it that way. And of course, the gun store owner is the one who told Politico in the first place this. And so I've got a real issue on my hands in terms of the reporting, because I've got a lot of people telling me that this is true, and yet the Secret Service is giving me a full frontal, just repeating the same thing they said to Politico. Sure. There was no agency involvement, no agency involvement. Well, the question then becomes, was this a situation where there were some agents who knew Hunter Biden that were doing this in their spare time, who identified themselves as Secret Service agents, who didn't make it clear as to whether or not it was part of they were conducting an official investigation, or they were just sort of freelancing to cover up for at the time, remember, in 2018, Joe Biden was a private citizen. Hunter Biden was a private citizen. He had not been given secret. I know that for Hunter, certainly did not have Secret Service detail at the time, obviously, right? We know this. And so the question then becomes, why were they involved at all? So then I go back to saying, well, you're not giving me any information here, or even asking me to give you a call so you can explain. You're just telling me no and saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so look, I've got information that says otherwise. I've got people who have told me on background. I've seen text messages on background from, I've said this on Twitter that I do have messages from Homeland Security officials at the time who say that the story is true and the Secret Service was involved.
Wow.
And so for you to tell me that it's completely false, I know that's not true. Now, I'd be willing to understand if there was a different situation going on, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm not just going to take down my reporting because you tell me to. Sorry, U.S. government.
Oh my gosh, I'm kind of blown away by that story. I mean, obviously, it's just.
And keep in mind that throughout all of this, they're not worried about the fact that this guy had an illegal firearm as a user, a habitual drug user, which we know, and for some reason also don't do anything about. They don't seem very worried that this guy had an illegal firearm. They seem worried that people are reporting.
Oh my gosh, please be careful. I mean, this is, again, the problem with the quote unquote deep state. And
yeah, right. I am of sound mind.
Yes,
I love my life. I love my family. I have much to live for. No.
Yes. This is the danger of, the other side of trying.
Well, and the funny thing is, I've actually called to the Federalist. I've called to my friend Raheem Kassam at National Pulse and told him, kind of told people what was going on, because I know that I'm certainly not the only person who's reported this.
Sure.
And other mainstream publications who have also reported on it. And I said, have you guys been getting hit up by the Secret Service comms department the way I am? They said, no. They said, Jack, and every single one of them told me that their phone, they said, no, you're the only person who's called us this weekend. So I've been kind of scratching my head why it is that my information is so dangerous to them.
Sometimes it's because it's the truth, or usually it's because of the truth. But speaking of another danger tied to Hunter, as we've spoken about at length before, but wanting to hear more, your insights.
So, by the way, I should mention that I'm not going to name names on this one, but the person who's been contacting me has a disturbing amount of ties to Delaware, is a native of Delaware, was a former teacher at Wilmington University, and started her career as a journalist in Delaware. So it's just very interesting connections that I've seen in this situation. A lot of ties to Wilmington. Just kind of weird about that. Funny how that works.
How, evidence is being buried by,
just one of those things.
Right. Exactly. Another not so funny thing, though, is the connection with China and what's been going on with the cover up with the WHO still to this day. We've spoken with other journalists. Obviously, you've mentioned Raheem, and we've spoken with you about it, Miranda Devine at the Post, but wanted to hear your take on what's been going on with respect to the WHO. I know you're very keyed into global affairs, specifically what's going on in China, and the fact that they've really buried the evidence that the virus was started in Wuhan and, was even created potentially on purpose. Can you speak to that right now as to what we know? And
what's quite interesting about this story, and I think most people have followed the thread here, is that the WHO, throughout the entire point of this, has tried to, at every step of the way, Dr. Tedros and his flunkies have tried to assuage China of any and all guilt. Remember, they told us early on that this did not have human-to-human transmission. They knew that China was locking up doctors. They knew that China was doing everything they can to lie about this. They didn't share the genome sequencing of the virus early on and on all of this, so people outside of China could understand what was happening. The WHO knew. They knew all of these things early on. And Xi Jinping, who is the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, I don't refer to him as president because presidents are elected. Xi Jinping is not elected. He's selected. And even in Mandarin. So by way of background, I lived in China for 2 years. I was a Mandarin linguist in the U.S. Navy. I've been studying China for about 15 years at this point. That in China, they do not refer to him as Xi Zongtong, which would be President Xi. They refer to him as Xi Juxi, which is Chairman Xi, the same way as Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao. So there's no President Xi. It's not a thing. And really, you saw the brazenness of China with Tony Blinken's completely botched, failed summit in Anchorage. Remember, the media hyped up that meeting in Anchorage like it was going to be the America is back situation. We're going to get back on touch with China. Oh, I haven't said this publicly yet today, but today I did get information that Biden is planning a summer tour of Europe, where he wants to call it the America is Back tour. I don't think that's been reported anywhere yet. So we just broke news here.
You're breaking so much news. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so that I haven't had time to report it yet.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, so hold on, folks. We're breaking up. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Yeah, so Biden's planning a summertime tour of Europe, which of course, go to Europe in the summertime. It's like his,
nice.
It's his retirement tour, his last hurrah, because I think he knows he's probably not going to see too many summers in the White House. Just is what it is, folks. It is what it is, right? We don't wish any ill will of Joe Biden, but it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? And God bless him, and I really do wish him good health. I really do.
Yeah, we respect the office.
Just as a person, I feel very bad when I see, what's happening with him, and we'll all get there someday. Like, we'll all get there someday, and you hope you can. For me, I hope I've got a whole bunch of grandkids on my knee to tell stories to, and that's what it is. But so he is planning this tour of Europe. But then we saw with the summit in Anchorage that Tony Blinken was completely broadsided, because Tony Blinken is a guy who he's been an administrator in sort of the U.S. bureaucracy, U.S. foreign policy bureaucracy for a long time. Jake Sullivan is along with him. Jake Sullivan, former Hillary Clinton advisor. He was involved with Libya, the illegal invasion of Libya that we essentially conducted under false pretenses. Then the killing of Gaddafi, the Benghazi situation, et cetera, et cetera. That's Jake Sullivan, which can't give him a pass on that. Tony Blinken goes in there and he's thinking, well, I know the CCP. I've known them for years. These Chinese officials. It's not what OAN is saying. It's not what these conservative super hawks are saying. It's not what Peter Navarro and Jack Posobiec are saying. No. It's, they're good people. We've gone out, we've spent time together. And here's the problem, Tony. You weren't whining and dining them. They were whining and dining you, Tony Blinken. And so you kind of got played for a chump. And when it got to the point where they were actually meeting, he sat down with Yang Jiechi. I actually met him years ago when my very first visit to China, which was through like a State Department trip for college kids, and we got to meet Yang Jiechi. At the time, he was on the State Council in China. He was leading the foreign affairs there. Now he's gone, and he's a very intelligent guy. He's a ruthless operator, extremely shrewd politician and diplomat. There's no surprise to me at all that he's become China's top expert in foreign policy, and that he now sits on the Politburo, which is the ruling organ of the Communist Party. It's basically the highest rung you can go in communism. And then the leader of the Politburo is the chairman, right? So the person who leads the Politburo Standing Committee is the actual chairman of the entire party. So you're on the highest possible rung of the CCP when you're on the Politburo. That's Yang Jiechi sitting across from Tony Blinken. And he treats him like a water boy. He just starts berating him. Because Tony Blinken made a complete diplomatic faux pas by leading with attacking China on human rights. Yang Jiechi is like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to do this. And then he just starts berating him. He says, you're going to accuse us of racism. Aren't you the people who are always saying that your African Americans are being killed by your police? You're the ones with all the unrest. You're the ones who have had an insurrection. You're the ones who can't seem to stop all the racism in America that you keep talking about. Why should we listen to you? You've told us you're the most racist country in the world. So why should China take any advice from you when it comes to issues of race? And it's like the Democrats painted themselves into a corner, and they thought they could have one message for an internal audience and one message for an external audience. That just doesn't work. It's not how it, China can pay attention to CNN as well. They're watching Chris Cuomo and Jake Tapper and Don Lemon and all of these purveyors of anti-American sentiment, and then they turn it back on the Tony Blinkens and Joe Bidens of the world, and you've destroyed America's moral standing. And so when you've done that, then thug regimes like China, like so many others, Iran out there in the world today, like Putin and the oligarchs of Russia, like the oligarchs of Ukraine, they can turn around and say, who are you to say you have any moral standing? When we look at the things that you've done, the botched Syria raid, the drone strike that Biden did early on is a prime example of that, right? They didn't end up hitting anyone who was tied to the rocket attack on U.S. troops. Kamala Harris wasn't even told of it beforehand. They're cutting her out of the decision process. So That being said, she will be our next president. So I'm putting money on that one. She will be our next president. No, just get used to it, folks. Kamala 2021. That's the train I'm on right now. Kamala 2021. Embrace it. Love it. She will be our next president. Yes. Yes. And so the situation they find themselves in now with the WHO is kowtowing. To go back to your original point, and Peter Daszak and all the people they brought together, they put together a team of the most China-sympathetic, pro-China researchers they could find. They walked in, told them what the talking points were going to be, and then they turn around and start repeating it to the world audience. That's what's going on with the WHO. When you've got so many scientists, and I'm sure Miranda Devine has said this a million times, anyone who listens to War Room knows this. They haven't gone in and done the actual research. They haven't opened the books on their gain of function research. That's when you're researching a virus as it passes from animal to animal. We've outlawed it in the United States, but they were doing that in this Wuhan lab. They've not opened the books. They've not told anybody what's going on in these experiments. And so when you're not allowing people to even see what's going on in there, you've deleted an entire database of research, then how is it, right? How is it that you can even call that an investigation when you're not showing us your cards and letting us know what happened? Look, the French were supposed to keep an eye on this place. They pulled out because they knew what was going on. They knew the corruption. They didn't want, to be involved in it. But of course, being the French, they didn't really call it out at the time. They were perhaps also a little bit too worried of China. And so the situation we find ourselves in, like much of the world, is that China has infiltrated the same way that communists have infiltrated every institution, the long march through the institutions. This is Antonio Gramsci, the Italian philosopher. This was his idea. Herb Marcuse, many people have had this idea of the only way to take down the West is to subvert these institutions. The WHO is, of course, a Western institution. The United Nations is, of course, a Western institution, but they have been subverted and weakened systematically over the course of a generation. And now, when China has really positioned themselves as sort of the top dog in the anti-American alliance around the world, they are now the ones pulling the strings.
Well, another issue that, not to change topics too much, but the border crisis is certainly one that you can't not talk about. On TV, everyone's saying this crisis is created by Trump and Biden is cleaning up the mess. But, again, you have a very prescient tweet about, the fact that actually Biden is the one who's causing much of the problem we're seeing at the border right now. So can you just elaborate?
The current numbers are looking at something 2 and 3 times as high as the peak in 2019 under Trump. 2 or 3 times as high. The amount of back when, sort of the kids in cages meme was first propagated by AOC and others, that this is much dwarfs. It absolutely dwarfs the amount at that time. And my colleague, who I hope that you guys will get a chance to have on, please reach out to her. She's fantastic. Jen Pellegrino just spent a whole week down at the border. She went down with Ted Cruz, an entire group of senators, and DEA and ICE and DHS, who are all down there working hard. They were in there day and night. And now I've started just now to see some of the footage that she's put together, some of the information that she's put together in terms of this. We're seeing the fact that a 9-month-old girl was unfortunately drowned in the Rio Grande River, that was not able to be saved. We don't know how many people are dying on their way up. We know that a 6-month-old child was just saved by Homeland Security forces. They were able to get the kid out of the water. I just saw a video on CBS of 2 toddlers being dropped over the border wall. But it's a horrific video, disgusting. I have a 2-year-old myself, and it's just, you can't not think, God, your heart goes out to these children. But these are human traffickers and smugglers who are bringing people across, and they know that when you bring a child across, I've spoken to DHS agents about this and CBP, that when you bring a child across, it is like having a subway pass, right? It's like having a subway token, that that if you have a child with you, and that Joe Biden's policy is, if I have a child, I cannot be separated and I cannot be sent back, then that is your get into America free card. That child is your get into America free card. And it's disgusting. It's loathsome. It's horrific. It is Joe Biden's border policy. And one thing that Jen Pellegrino brought out in her reporting, when she went to the airport, this is in McLean, Texas, when she went to the airport, she said that 40% of the people there, because McLean is in a major channel of people crossing the border, 40% of the people at the airport were illegal migrants with they had these packets, these sort of like a manila envelope, like a large manila envelope with English writing on it that said, this is the airplane, this is the flight I need to get on, this is my destination, can you take me to, and then, can you take me to my connecting flight? One was for Chicago, one was for LA. And then I asked her, I said, Jen, what's in the envelope? And she said, they're full of money. And then the envelope was full of money. I said, what is this? Where does this money come from? Where is this money going? I said, where's it going to come from? It comes from you. It comes from me. It comes from all of us. That's U.S. taxpayer dollars that are literally going to fund this flood of illegal migrants across the United States. And you see that the victims of this are very young children. We don't know who's coming in. And look, they asked me about it the other day. I was on a panel and they said, do you think that what's going on the border right now would be considered a crisis? And they asked us all yes or no. And I said, no, I wouldn't consider it a border crisis. And they'd say, why no? And I said, because under Joe Biden, we do not have a southern border.
Right, exactly. Crisis meaning it's the current state of affairs, and a crisis that we all are experiencing with respect to our own, finances, our funds. Small businesses are suffering. I mean, that's a crisis that persists. It hasn't changed, especially in New York. The infrastructure bill was passed today. Outrageous. $2.2 trillion, which was supposedly going to infrastructure. What's your take on that, and why? What do you think can come out of it in terms of this pork barrel spending? That's obviously a huge component of it.
Well, I remember the Stimulus Act under Barack Obama, the Omnibus Stimulus Act that he did. And this was the American Investment and Recovery Act, I think they called it back then. And they used to put these signs up in this shovel ready jobs, right? And that's what we were going to get when the financial crisis hit in 2009, 2010. And the problem was, weren't we supposed to get all of the infrastructure upgraded back then?
Right.
Why is the infrastructure still crumbling when we spent billions and billions of dollars back then, much of which in that case was either debt financed or it was financed through inflationary policies like quantitative easing. So printing more money, basically, money printer go brr. And yet all of the money seemed to go to special interest groups. It went to unions, which was then used for political lobbying or political donations. And it seemed like none of the money actually went into infrastructure. And so my worry is that Democrats are going to be doing the exact same thing yet again. Now, that being said, because I've found my politics lately trending a bit more populist than conservative at this point, and I'm just going to say it, I don't really care if they're putting higher taxes on corporations, because corporations have lost me, and they lost me a long time ago as a supporter, right? There's that sort of like basic Republican thing of, Republicans are for business, and, we love innovation and we love creativity. And I love those things, but that's not what I'm seeing from these companies anymore. Certainly not the tech sector, and certainly not Wall Street. Right. That you don't stand for the little guy. You don't stand for innovation. You stand for corruption. You stand for revolving doors with the Obama administration, the Biden administration. You stand for getting around regulations. You stand for restrictions on our freedom of speech. In many cases, when you look at the case of these payment processors, they're taking away, like PayPal, Venmo, they're taking away people's right to be able to spend money in our modern economy, right? Because of their political beliefs, because I don't like something that you said or a belief you had. And it's absolutely Orwellian. It's absolutely draconian. And so when I hear that Joe Biden wants to increase the corporate tax rate, then it's sad though, because I know there's a lot of small businesses that are going to get hit by that. And so I wish, in my I guess my heart of hearts, I'd love to be able to do that just to the Fortune 500. But I also know that at the same time, there's a lot of, so I'm for Main Street. I'm for the small business owner. But when it comes to the multinationals, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, etc., like I just don't care about them anymore. They are not on my side. They're absolutely not.
Agreed. And that's specifically why, I mentioned small business. I think there has to be a huge differentiation between these corporations, which frankly, it's all a money grab, right? With Nike producing in China, and yet they're espousing their beliefs that they're for equality and, supporting people of all races. Yeah, right. Of all.
Well, when I see Disney pushing Stop Asian Hate, and I say, What do you think the Uyghurs are? What do you think the Uyghurs are? They're Asians. They're Central Asians,
Mm-hmm.
right? Muhammad Anwar was a South Asian immigrant, a Pakistani immigrant, just doing his job delivering food here in Washington, D.C. He's killed horrifically on tape. And the mayor of the city puts up a tweet talking about how to avoid carjacking the next day. It's ridiculous. Yeah, there's no marches in the street for him. There's no, oh, we need to have justice for Muhammad Anwar. And now it's become this weird politicized thing where we're not supposed to talk about that. You know, you can say justice for George Floyd, but if you say justice for Muhammad Anwar, well, because his perpetrator wasn't a police officer, because they weren't like a white male, then, oh, that's something different and we don't need to worry about that. I mean, what world are you living in, right? Do these people's lives matter or not? It's as simple as that.
Right. And
they do, for the record, they do, obviously.
Of course they do. And the main reason is also because these journalists who come out and are now activist journalists, you know, on the other side, not on our side, but on the other side, they actually are trying to destroy people's lives. And, you know, they're sycophants for Joe Biden. And we saw that even last week in his press conference, which was laughable.
That was the beginning of the end, even internally. Like, you know, I don't know if there's to make a Game of Thrones reference. I don't know if we still do those, but you know, when you have Cersei Lannister in King's Landing, you know what she's going to do, and it's the same thing with Kamala Harris. You know, Kamala Harris was sitting there watching that press conference. In the back of her head, she's thinking one thing, and it's the number 25, 25, 25, the 25th Amendment. Mm-hmm. Because if she can get dirt on him, then you know what she's going to do? She's going to go over to Jill Biden, because you know Jill's the one who makes the decisions, and say, Jill, we can do this the hard way, or we can do this the easy way. Either you can resign, call it a heart murmur, say whatever you want, you know, Joe, or I'm going to leak this to the Washington Post, to CNN, and everybody else, and we are going to go full 25th Amendment on you. And there is a split in the White House right now. There's sort of Team Joe and Team Kamala, and I got to tell you, Team Kamala is getting momentum.
Oh my gosh, it's again very scary, and of course she's in charge of our border, which also
she's going to be president. I'm telling you, she's just it's going to happen. Get over it. She will be our first female selected president, not our first female elected president. So get used to that saying. It'll be selected, not elected. Kamala Harris, 47th president, star. You know, like a little asterisk. 45th president. Asterisks. In the same vein, by the way, that Gerald Ford became president without running for vice president or president himself, and yet he still ended up president.
Well, that would certainly be bleak. And given that we need faith at this moment, again, not to switch topics too completely, but we all know, you know, you've espoused your Judeo-Christian values, and we think that's super important, you know, to keep those within the United States, since it is an attack on our religious freedoms as well. It's not just freedom of speech, it's freedom of religion, freedom to practice. Can you talk a little bit about faith in your life and, you know, keeping the faith at this moment, given that it is Holy Week, we have Easter Sunday, Passover right now?
And well, I think it is a time of reflection for us going into Holy Week. You know, interestingly enough, so I'm Catholic, my wife is Orthodox, so I joke that we're mending the schism together. And so in Orthodox Lent, you actually give up meat for the entirety of Lent. So that's the whole period, the whole 40 days. Of course, Sundays don't count. A lot of Catholics get this confused, because Sundays are always a feast day. Every Sunday is a little Easter. So there's no fasting on Sundays, right? Jesus is very explicit about this, where the situation in the Bible where he went in the gospel, where he went and got the corn and they picked it and ate it on a Sunday or on the Sabbath. So you do not fast on Sundays. It's just not done. And that's why it's 40 days, not 47 for Lent. And so to me, having my faith and then really just having kids, it's been for me something that, realizing this is my role, right, is in life, not only to be somebody who, you know, I've been blessed with the platform that I have. I've been blessed to have the voice that I have in the movement and in the country. And if there's anything I can do, it's to remind people of those values, to my fellow Catholics, to remind folks to be out there, say the rosary every day. Don't forget about it. If you don't say the rosary, you're not on the team. You know, that's what we always say to Catholics. It's like a Taylor Marshall thing. But it is something that when we're faced with the abject nihilism and postmodernist reversion and inversion of morality, that the only thing you can respond with is the correct traditional human form of morality, and that is those Judeo-Christian values. And so for me, passing that on to my kids, we go every Sunday, even, we have stupid COVID social distancing. So if you don't get there early enough, you got to stand like in the lobby with, I've got a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old, but we go, right? And actually one thing that we do is I make sure, now New York, you've got some beautiful churches in New York City, absolutely beautiful churches. Some of the oldest churches in America are there. And I think it's wonderful. And so one thing that I've said is I will always go to an old Catholic church rather than one of the modern ones. I don't like the ones that I don't like feeling like I'm in a community center with a cross, right? This isn't like a YMCA kind of thing. I want to be, right, I want the stained glass windows. I want the marble pillars. I want the fantastic artwork. I mean, this is the religion that gave us the Mona Lisa, the Sistine Chapel, right? The painting of the Last Supper, the St. Peter's Basilica, some of the great, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which thank God is being restored, right? Some of the greatest artistic works of the Western world. And so this is the legacy that we need to pass on, and all of it was from to the Book of Kells in Dublin, Trinity College in Dublin, that these are works done to provide worship to God, right? And so this is our tradition, and we shouldn't stray from that. We shouldn't hide from that. And I say this as a Polish American, right? So Poland, is a country that did lose its sovereignty for about 130 years, prior to World War I, had no sovereignty whatsoever. It was gone. It was wiped off the map. Then, not long after that, you had World War II, 1939, of course, invaded by two sides, by the Nazis and the communists. Mm-hmm. Then, was under communist rule until the 1990s. And so you have a situation where, when you say to a Polish person, well, does culture matter? Do values matter? And they'll respond, what else matters, right? What else would you put on top of that? And you saw the Polish team today in the World Cup qualifier. Everybody was asked to take a knee for Black Lives Matter or racism and the history, etc. And the Polish team refused. They didn't take a knee. They stood up, and they were playing England. And so there's this stark image of all the English soccer players kneeling, and the Polish team just standing and saying, okay, well, we're ready for the match to begin. So, and they asked the coach about it earlier. They said, were you guys making a political statement? Did you have some reason for that? He said, no, we came here to play football. We had no discussion about this whatsoever. Why would we? It's not something that we're about. And so it's something I really like about Poland. I really like about that culture. And I try to promote when I can that when you have a grounded traditional culture, a traditional set of values, I always use the catchphrase on Twitter or on various social medias is, be a rebel, start a family. And I think I think it really is. You have kids and you go to church or synagogue, you go to religious service. That is rebellion today. That is the true rebellion today against postmodernism, against nihilism, against everything that's been pushed. Go read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis if you want to understand how the other side works, because it's the Screw Tape Letters. That is exactly it. When there's so many false prophets and so many lies in society, when sin is being promoted in our culture, you need to have a strong bulwark against it. And for me, that is traditional values, 100%.
Well, on that note, as a fellow Polish American, Jakuya bardzo. Jakuya. And we, again, so grateful and thankful that you are part of this movement and, promoting traditional values, as well as, really risking so much to keep the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion going. And we all need to get involved and push back against cancel culture, to your point. But also, Jack, we would love to have you at the club in New York to when your book does come out. And
yeah, of course,
obviously you're part of our family, and the fact that you broke news on our webinar, we're just so grateful, because my gosh, what you're going through in terms of your reporting, it never ceases to amaze me, the incredible journalists we do have on our side, fighting the man, the David and Goliath. It's just a lot, but thank you so much, Jack. And where can we find you right now? What platform?
Yeah, right now, find me on Twitter until the day I get banned, at Jack Posobiec, JackPosobiec. The book is actually up on Amazon. If you just search Antifa, you find it. My name. Telegram. For those who don't do Twitter, I'm on Telegram. I'm on Parler. I do post on Parler regularly. I'm on Instagram, and we just did a reorder of our. We have a for anyone who's out there. I know this is sort of the Met Club, but if there's anyone out there who've got kids, or if you're into like comic books, we actually have a comic book that we did last Christmas that came out. We called it Agent Poso, and it's sort of about my family. But it gets into like we're a secret, task force going up against China. It's set in the future, so it predicts certain things will go on. So what is it? Chelsea Clinton is the president, and Greta Thunberg is the UN secretary person, and so there's a Chinese sort of like climate change general who's trying to take over the world, and we've got to stop them. So it's like me, DC Drano, Cassandra Fairbanks, my wife, and a couple of little cameos here and there throughout, but it's set 10 years in the future. So we'll see how it goes. And we just did a whole new round of those at iconcomics.com. And so I think I'm going to do my first Comic Con, where I'm actually going to be, appearing as a presenter at a Comic Con in Texas, in Austin, coming up this summer, which is funny to think like, wow, I'm doing a Comic Con. Well, that's gonna be interesting. And so I'm sure there'll be lots of, I'm sure Antifa will be very happy about that.
No, that's so cool. And it's so
Oh, that's actually what this, I forgot, I have the poster right there.
Nice, love it.
Yeah, that's like the cover they did. And it's really cool. For anyone who, not to like get super down the line on this, but for anyone who knows the comic series of Batman, or the movies of Batman, the character Bane was actually created by Chuck Dixon, and Chuck Dixon is the guy who came in and wrote the comic about me and my family. He just said, he and the artist came together. A lot of people who worked on the Clinton Cash graphic novel came in and did this, and as well as the comic, the Action Bible is what they call it. So if you go into like what do they call it, those stores, the Hobby Lobby. So when you go into a Hobby Lobby or something, you see the Action Bible graphic novel. Sergio Cariello, he's a Brazilian graphic artist, and he's just fantastic, utterly fantastic. So they approached me and they said, hey, we want to do this graphic novel series. We'd love to kind of, use your Intel background and kind of center it around there, and tell some cool stories. And so being able to work with somebody like Chuck Dixon, who, has the Batman, the Bane experience, he did a ton of Punisher, and a lot. He also did Birds of Prey, the one with Margot Robbie. The movie just came out.
Right. Yeah,
Harley Quinn. So yeah, Birds of Prey. He was the creator of Birds of Prey in the comics. That movie just came out, and really just amazing to be able to work with a guy like that. Where I'm like, wow, Chuck Dixon, I read your stuff, and you're like a legend, and you're writing a comic about me. This is weird, but Cool. So if people want to get into that, go to just iconcomics.com. You can see it there.
Well, thank you, Special Agent Poso. We will talk soon, but thank you everyone for tuning in tonight, and have a safe evening. And for those of you who celebrate, have safe holidays, Passover and Easter coming up. So take care, everyone.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję.